to work in Councilmember Sawant's office, and I am happy to introduce the person who needs no introduction at this party, Councilmember Kshama Sawant.
Thank you all for being here. The initial election results have been reported. At present, as you all know, the vote against the right-wing recall is 46.9%, and the vote for the recall is 53.1%. In every one of our elections, there has been a dramatic swing after election night in our direction. Given the unprecedented nature of this undemocratic December election, while we cannot be sure of the final result, if past trends hold, it appears working people may have prevailed in this fight. For certain is that working people and young people have roundly rejected this racist, right-wing, big business-backed attack. We know that from our tens of thousands of conversations in the last weeks in this district and the voter data we have systematically collected through that, we have the highest support ever based on those discussions. The massive support for working people and young people, from young people and working people for our campaign is also reflected in our record number of volunteers, over 1,500. And our record number of donors. We broke multiple records, our own records, in fact, from the past campaigns. We had more donors by a country mile than any Seattle election ever, with over 11,500 individual donors. We had more in-district donors than any campaign in Seattle history. With over 5,000 donors, nearly triple the number from the right-wing recall campaign. We raised more money without taking a dime in corporate cash, not that they were going to donate to us, than any city council campaign in Seattle history, raising over $1,010,000. We vowed to build the biggest Get Out the Vote campaign that Seattle has ever seen, and we have done exactly that. Our results tonight stand in stark contrast to those in November, where big business succeeded in buying the elections. The November election results, unfortunately, reflected the failure of many woke, progressive candidates and politicians, both in Seattle and around the country, in countering the false, fear-mongering, anti-poor, anti-worker, protest demonizing narrative by the Chamber of Commerce and the right wing. Just weeks ago, the City Council Democrats voted for raises for Seattle police. Yes, raises for them. In the context of the the ongoing racist policing, the continued federal oversight, and the context of SPD sending the largest single contingent of police officers to the January 6th attempted coup in Washington, D.C. The Democrats did this as public employees providing crucial social services in Seattle continue to be grossly underpaid. What did we do? We refused to back down in the face of a right-wing backlash, and we have fought against the efforts of the Democratic establishment to make concessions to the right. From day one, we have rejected the attempted racist characterization of peaceful protest movements as quote-unquote lawlessness and chaos. We never backed down from the need to further tax Amazon and big business rather than working people to fund affordable housing. Our Amazon tax, which working people won at the height of the Black Lives Matter protests in the summer of 2020, is a shining example of what can be won through movements if we have strategy, a democratically organized movement, an accountable leadership, and if we are willing to fight. We never back down from the urgent need for rent control. We have not backed down on renters' rights. In the midst of fighting this recall attack, we have won some of the most groundbreaking renters' rights in this year alone. From renters winning the right to an attorney, the ban on school year evictions, 6 months notice for all rent increases, and this is a biggie, forcing landlords to pay you, renters, 3 times your monthly rent if they force you to move because of rent increase. We never back down from the need for a socialist response to the climate catastrophe. We have called consistently for a socialist Green New Deal, including the need to take big energy corporations into democratic public ownership, because that is the only way we can stop them from destroying the planet as we know it. We have, in every way, run a groundbreaking socialist election campaign. We fought until the final hour. Volunteers were still arriving as this party started because they were helping get out the final votes of this struggle. Our message throughout this recall fight has been, which side are you on? Working people and Black Lives Matter, or big business and the right wing? We explained this at the doors, in our flyers, and in our ballot reply. The 15-month-long mockery of democracy has reminded us the difficulty of having a genuinely democratic society under the billionaire system. We saw the utter hypocrisy of how this thoroughly undemocratic recall system in Washington state was applied by the capitalist courts. The recall against Amazon's mayor, Jenny Durkin, tear gas Jenny, was unanimously thrown out by the state Supreme Court judges despite the weapons used by the police under her watch against peaceful protesters, myself included, despite the 18,000 complaints by protesters. Also in utter hypocrisy, the court rejected the recall effort against COVID-denying sheriff of Thurston County, though he bluntly refused to follow the mask mandate. It is telling and predictable that only the recall against socialist politics was allowed to go forward. Not only did it go forward, but it received the enthusiastic stamp of approval from the Supreme Court with language on the ballot that dishonestly implied that I had broken the law, even though I have not, and even though the courts do not judge the truth of the charges in recall cases. It is not only that the state Supreme Court applies the recall law, in a highly unequal and unjust manner, as they did also a century ago when Seattle's last elected socialist, Anna Louise Strong, was undemocratically removed through a recall. The court was also directly responsible for allowing right-wing voter suppression in this election. Originally, the state Supreme Court was supposed to rule on January 7th according to their own calendar. In fact, they are supposed to rule promptly on all recall cases according to their own norms. Instead, they not only did not rule on their own self-imposed timeline, they waited nearly 3 months to rule. Nearly 3 months with no explanation given, and all the while they listened to case after case. And by doing so, they allowed the recall to bypass the normal November election. Only the court's delay made that possible. Working people are not naive. We cannot afford to be naive. This blatant voter suppression did not come out of thin air. It came from the state Supreme Court, from the institutions of the capitalist class. They have, and it's no surprise that the right-wing recall campaign took the opportunity for voter suppression that was offered. The laws under capitalism are not written for us, and the courts themselves uphold just as much as they can get away with the interests of the billionaires. They defend a deeply unequal racist status quo in which the overwhelming majority struggle to get by, while the very wealthy live in enough opulence to last 1,000 lifetimes. Slavery was once the law of the land. It took a second American Revolution, the U.S. Civil War, to end slavery. After that, black people faced a century of brutal system of racism under Jim Crow segregation. While the lynchings that backed up segregation were not legally sanctioned, no court in the land would convict the lynchers. Indigenous people in this country had their land systematically stolen at gunpoint. The treaty rights legally promised were denied by the courts. Their children rounded up and taken away to quote-unquote boarding schools. All this was sanctioned by the law. And now that the Black Lives Matter movement is fighting back again against institutional racism, we see the racist courts punishing the protesters, but not the violent racists. We just saw that with the shameful acquittal of Kyle Rittenhouse after murdering 2 people and injuring another in Wisconsin. Roe v. Wade is now under attack, with basic women's rights under threat from the U.S. Supreme Court. Corporate cash has weighed heavily in this campaign, not surprisingly. We have proudly and powerfully fought back in a way that should be an example to all working people, regardless of ultimately whether we win or lose. We say that when we fight, we can win, but that does not mean that we will always win. The working class will have setbacks also, even if we do everything right, even if we fight with every ounce of courage, because this bankrupt system is stacked up against us. We do know, though, however, we do know, if we don't fight, we will never win. There are different kinds of setbacks and defeats. If we lose this fight, we should be crystal clear that all of us here and those beyond this room who fought with us, that we should be incredibly proud. Not only of how hard we fought, but particularly of how we fought. Of how we used this campaign to raise the sights of working people. That we never once went on the defensive, but rather we went on the offensive to win more gains for the working class and for renters this year. What has been at stake with this election wasn't only about one working class city council position, neither for the working class nor for the ruling class. This has always been about the powerful example we have set of successful class struggle. Bernie Sanders once said, if this is going to be class war, it is about time that the working class won that war. Bernie on this. We are not the ones sowing division. We are the ones fighting for the unity of the working class, the overwhelming majority in US society against this rotten system. It is the ruling class that relentlessly attacks ordinary people, denying us the most basic rights to health care, to affordable housing, to a living wage. Never content, the ruling class puts its profits ahead of human lives and even the continuation of human civilization under threat from the climate crisis. Even in the context of COVID, from basic workplace safety to vaccine nationalism, the billionaires have put their profits ahead of human lives. We have no choice but to build the labor movement and the socialist left because everything depends on it. October and November saw a crucial reawakening of struggle among US workers, a historic victory with the John Deere strike. The historic fights at Nabisco and Kellogg's, and the historic struggle of the rank-and-file-led Pacific Northwest Union Carpenters strike. Defeating the recall attack will be a powerful example for the working class nationally and internationally. If the ruling class succeeds, it will embolden them to attack progressives and socialists nationally. Already, in the wake of the November election results, Fox News is crowing and threatening to go after the squad. Imagine how determined they would be if they won this one. We can also expect that if we do win, that will not be the end of attacks by any means. There will be attempts to call into question the election result if we win. Attacks in the courts of different kinds. We may even have reached a point where the ruling class goes after socialist alternative directly as they went after the Black Panthers and anti-war activists. Win or lose, we should not forget the ruling class keeps going after us because we have shown how to win for the working class. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly with unprecedented victories. It is our badge of honor if we as working people become enemy number one to the billionaire class. It means we are getting it right and we are getting it done. And there are crucial lessons to learn. In November, as I said, the victories for big business and by large margins were in no small part because of the kind of progressive campaigns that were run. And we have to be honest about this. I endorsed Nikita Oliver as a movement leader and hoped they would win. I hoped the big business candidates would lose in other races in the November election in spite of the major weaknesses of the woke progressive Democrats' campaigns. But big business had a virtual sweep in Seattle's November election as well as big victories nationally. Why? Because while corporate PACs backed the quote-unquote law and order candidates, the progressive Democrats overwhelmingly failed to campaign on working class issues.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
Worst was Lorena Gonzalez, letting Bruce Harrell win. But even Nikita Oliver never campaigned in a real way for rent control. They never campaigned to expand the Amazon tax for affordable housing. Instead, unfortunately, Oliver actually removed rent control from their website platform and they backed away from rent control in a high-profile debate. Why did the other Democrats, like Lorena Gonzalez, not offer anything to the working class or fight on any working class demands? Why did they allow the election to be framed and defined by the right-wing backlash against Black Lives Matter, by a right-wing law and order message? Why did they not call out the big business backing of their opponents, the $2 million in corporate money being used to buy those elections? The blowout in Gonzalez's race was because she never brought up any fighting demands. She campaigned on the defensive throughout, unwilling to point out that her opponent was the favored candidate of big business because she herself did not want to antagonize big business. And this is because the Democratic Party is not a party of the working class, but rather a party of the billionaires. Even the Democratic Party's progressive wing ultimately wants to make peace with big business and limit itself to making largely symbolic changes within the status quo. The Democrats are obviously different than the increasingly outright reactionary billionaire party of the Republicans, but it's not enough. Because the Democratic Party enables the Republican Party every day. To be clear, I am not talking about Democratic Party voters or rank and file activists who broadly want their party to represent working people. I am talking about the pro-capitalist elected officials and the higher functionaries. Now, in the wake of big business victories in November, the Democrats on the Seattle City Council are looking to hug the new corporate politicians, and you just watch what is going to happen while they continue to attack our movements. It is no accident that while Mosqueda continues to oppose our legislation for rent control, she has decided to join new corporate mayor Bruce Harrell's quote-unquote transition team. It is the absolute failure of the Democratic Party to fight for working people. It's not just failure, but its efforts to block and crush those who do fight, like Bernie Sanders, and like our movement here. It's that which paves the way for the right wing. Let's not forget an actual Republican, Ann Davison, who joined the Republican Party in the era of Trump, has gotten elected as Seattle's city attorney. My friends, we urgently need a party of our own. A party of the working class and youth which bases itself on fighting unapologetically, not on appeasement of the elite. The failure of Biden to do much of anything for working class people during this historic crisis is rooted in the fact that his administration and his party based themselves on what is acceptable to big business. His failure to fight for a $15 minimum wage, as he promised, or Medicare for all, which he has always opposed on behalf of the billionaires, or for the funding urgently needed to fight the climate crisis. The failure of the squad to win much of anything for working class people is because rather than build fighting movements as we have in Seattle, they have built an alliance with Biden, Pelosi, and others. Ultimately, the growth of the right wing and the far right is spurred on again and again by the anger and disappointment with the Democratic Party. Trump is a con man and a reactionary, but the support he still has in the working class is a direct result of the anger at the Democrat for hardly even pretending to fight for working people. The continuation of this will be utter disaster. It will be further growth of the right wing. If it continues, it will mean a more dangerous right-wing administration in the White House, whether it's Trump in 2024 or someone else. Here in Seattle, the Democrats in City Hall have refused to fight for working people, refused to take on big business, and refused to use a movement-based strategy. But it's worse than that. They have actually fought our movement every step of the way and tried to undermine working people's movements repeatedly. Partly by falsely making it about my personality, blaming me for not following the quote-unquote process, and claiming that I am not quote-unquote nice. When we have used our position on the dais to expose them, as is our moral and political duty. Democratic Party city council members spoke out against this right-wing recall. Not one, not one. Given what is at stake for the working class in this recall fight, it tells you all you need to know about these Democratic politicians. Even when the stakes are high, even the progressive wing of the Democratic Party betrays working people again and again. Many people ask, and have asked throughout the history of capitalist democracy, why is it that when progressive people get elected, even well-meaning ones, they don't do anything much, or worse, they utterly sell out? There is no big mystery. Fundamentally, it's because this system puts enormous and relentless pressure on elected representatives to operate within the status quo. And it is only by basing yourself on movements that you can fight back. We need to run our own candidates, independent of the two parties, as a step towards building a new party for the working class. And we need to build the socialist movement. I am a member of both Socialist Alternative and the Democratic Socialists of America. The first is an explicitly revolutionary socialist organization, and the latter is a Big Tent socialist organization. We need both, and it is very positive that the DSA has grown to more than 90,000 members. However, it will not be enough to organize generally around the ideas of socialism. To be more effective, DSA needs to, and I say this as a member of the DSA, DSA needs to build its Marxist wing and base itself on class struggle methods. That is to say, on organizing working people to fight for their interests, not on accommodation or alliances with the existing power structures, with the non-profits, with the progressive Democrats. You may have heard that I am a Marxist, or even that I am a Trotskyist, you know. Haters will tell you the truth. Haters will tell you the truth. Yes, I am a Marxist and I am a Trotskyist. But what is Marxism and why is it important? In short, Marxism is scientific socialism. It is based on the study of history of capitalism and its inner laws and about what is necessary to take humanity forward. As Karl Marx said, quote, philosophers have only interpreted the world in different ways. The point is to change it. The basic ideas of scientific socialism are now 175 years old, but they are and will remain the most modern of ideas so long as the bankrupt system of capitalism exists. Marx recognized that history under capitalism, under all previous class societies, was defined by class struggle. The ruling class viciously exploits the majority of society to whatever degree it can get away with, and the exploited can only win any gains by getting organized and fighting back. Capitalism is a system of ongoing crises, characterized by instability, by recessions and depressions. Marx saw that the ruthless quest for profits would lead to imperialist powers dominating not only their own working classes, but increasingly those across the globe. He concluded that the working class was the only force that could take society forward, and that could only happen if we got organized with clear ideas. He saw that no ruling class anywhere, ever, would allow a society based on equality and solidarity. He saw that the engine of change under underclass society is class struggle and ultimately revolution. These basic ideas are as true today as ever, and the urgency is even greater as the capitalists prepare to take humanity over the cliff of climate catastrophe. We will not prevent that disaster by compromising with the capitalists. We will not prevent it by making alliances with corporate politicians and telling each other that we have to be nice, and nice defined by them. We need to take the big corporations, starting with the big energy corporations, as I said, into democratic public ownership, run them democratically by the workers. If we don't, the bosses will destroy the planet as we know it. The clock is ticking. We urgently need to rebuild a fighting labor movement. We need to build powerful mass movements. We need to win the majority of the working class to socialist ideas. How do we do that? By showing the power of those ideas in actions, as we have done again and again in Seattle. By showing how we have, by winning victories like the $15 minimum wage, like the Amazon tax, like groundbreaking renters' rights, by fighting alongside renters, workers on strike and helping them win their demands, by fighting alongside social movements for the same. This is how the socialist movement must be built. Yes. And this is why the example of socialist alternative here in Seattle and nationally is so crucial. If you recognize the importance of what we are doing, if you are impressed with what we have done in this campaign and throughout our Socialist City Council office in Seattle, 8 years, if you want to learn more about how we have been so effective, I really encourage you to find out more. Join Socialist Alternative. There are forms right now being circulated to join Socialist Alternative. I urge you to talk to the people with the clipboards. Can you raise your clipboards? What are our next steps? In Seattle, we have an unfinished fight for rent control, that's for sure. We collected 15,000 signatures this summer and fall. Now we need to build a movement to force the Democrats to pass our legislation. And it's not going to happen without a fighting movement. Nationally, we see the vicious attack on Roe v. Wade on basic women's rights. We need the DSA, the unions, the big women's rights organizations to organize mass protests. We need to build on the strikes and militancy of Striketober, and for that we need to build rank-and-file leadership to overcome the opposition of so many trade union leaders who have opposed class struggle methods. We have not only these crucial fights in front of us, we have a world to win. Another world is both possible and necessary. If a small revolutionary socialist organization in Seattle can beat the richest guys in the world again and again, you can be sure that the organized power of the wider working class can and will change society.